Good afternoon, everybody, and wish you a very happy new year. And thanks to ETEnergy for this opportunity. So today I'll be talking on the topic called, which is a very interesting topic, is demystifying the petrol and diesel pricing in India. So why this topic is because if you see India's consumption of energy from various sources, the diagram which I have in the left side, you can see we have broadly categorized them under 4 categories: coal and lignite, petroleum oil, natural gas, and electricity. You can see that petroleum oil, which is the second category, is actually having a very good share. So it is actually an important energy source for the country. And on the right side, if you see, if we break that petroleum oil into various type of fuel, you can see the petrol and diesel are essentially account for bulk of them. So that is why the pricing of these two products are very important. So if I want to put it that why there is a need to demystify the pricing mechanism for petroleum products, there are some broadly large 4 or 5 points I can talk about. The large reliance of Indian economy on these two fuels, because we know that the diesel is essentially used for all kind of transportations, and the petrol is also a very important fuel. So their pricing has always been a subject of discussion, and variation in these prices that can create a significant degree of change or the inflation in the economy. Now, pricing mechanism of these products are very complex, and they have gone through many changes in the past, and it's not well understood by the masses. There are always been very ambiguity, and it might be the people who are in the field who understand how this mechanism, how the pricing are set, or what are the mechanisms. But people, the common people on ground, they don't have much idea, and many of the time this particular topic, the pricing mechanism, has been essentially used as a political tool. So it is essentially had been a politically sensitive subject in the country. So it is actually important to understand the true rationale behind the price changes, why the price changes. These petrol and diesel prices, these two things are linked to which are parameters, and so that the common people, the people who are not related to oil and gas industry, can actually make a rationale that what all factors are changing globally, so that these things are changing in India, so that the subject is not misunderstood by the masses. With this background, I'll start with the history of this petroleum product pricing in India, and my focus will primarily be the petrol and diesel. There are also two more key petroleum products, which are kerosene and LPG, but here in this presentation we are focusing on petrol and diesel. So to give you a background, till 1939 there are essentially no controls whatsoever on the pricing of the petroleum products. Between 1939 to 1948, some kind of an account pooling for the major producers started, but this was primarily be done by the oil producing companies themselves, and there was not such intervention for the government. In 1948, the first time an attempt was made to regulate the prices through value stock account procedure, or it is also known as VSA. It was more of an import parity principle, and there was a standardized cost and agreed margins. And in this mechanism, any revenue realized by these companies in excess of the normal cost and the agreed margins was to be surrendered to the government. So government actually started coming into picture from 1948. Between 1948 and 1975, various different types of pricing mechanisms were tried in the market, and finally in 1975, based on recommendations, we came to a regime which is known as APM, or Administered Price Mechanism regime, which was there in India for quite some time. I essentially will give you a brief of what is this advanced price mechanism. So under this this mechanism, which was effectively bought in July 1995, the pricing mechanism shifted from the import parity to the cost plus principles. So what was this cost plus? Essentially, if you see the second point, the pricing of the petroleum products was based on the retention concept, where oil refineries and oil marketing companies and the pipelines were compensated on the operating cost and the fixed return of 12% post-tax on the net worth. This APM mechanism, so essentially there was a cost, the cost incurred by these companies, and then there is a fixed return. Based on that, the pricing was decided for a long time, between 1975 to 2002. And during this APM period, a number of oil pool accounts were maintained with the object to ensure stability in the selling price, insulate consumers from the international price fluctuations, and subsidization of consumer prices of certain sensitive products like kerosene for public distribution and domestic LPG by cross-subsidization from certain products like petrol and aviation fuel. So the products which are essentially going to the poor people, the prices of those products were cross-subsidized with the costly products like petrol and aviation fuel, aviation turbine fuel, ATM. More like the kind of a cross-subsidization that we see in the power sector these days, where the prices of a certain category of the consumers are actually subsidized, and this cross-subsidized to the industries or to the commercial segment. Now, in April 1998, from this cost plus kind of regime, the government actually shifted to import parity price regime, from where we essentially started getting into the price regime where we are now. Now, what is this import parity price? So one thing I just want to tell you here, many people, or generally the masses, they understand that because of the crude price up and down, there is essentially that crude price essentially linked to the petrol price or diesel price. Yes, it is, but it is indirectly linked. The crude price is never taken into account to calculate the price of the petrol or diesel, but it is essentially the international petrol and diesel price that is taken into account for calculating the petrol and the diesel price. So before even getting into that, what is the current mechanism, let us try to understand that why there was a shift, and what all changes have been made to that. So as I've already mentioned, that APM was essentially a cost plus kind of mechanism, and plus there was a fixed margin. In IPP, and there was a committee was formed in the September 1996, and the committee, they submitted a report on the restructuring of the oil industries, and this committee was essentially formed for growth of the hydrocarbon sector in India. So they essentially mentioned that APM cannot generate sufficient financial resources required for investment in the upstream and the downstream sector. Then private capital as well as foreign direct investment would not be forthcoming in view of inherent regulatory controls imposed by the government. Because you understand, APM was very much controlled, that was a controlled regime from the government. And APM does not provide strong incentives for investments in technological upgradation or for cost minimization, because you always knew that my cost is always covered. So that is why there was not much incentives to cover that cost. APM has, plus the fourth point was that APM has not been completely successful in achieving the primary objective of ensuring a consumer-friendly and internationally competitive, vibrant petroleum sector capable of a global presence to provide energy security to the country. So these are the 4 key points that actually came into that report, and based on that, a phased dismantling of this APM mechanism started from 1997 and finally ended at 2002. So in 2002, we went to a regime which is known as import parity price. Now, what is this import parity price? So there is a terminology which is known as refinery gate price. So refinery gate price is the price at which this petrol or diesel is essentially sold to the oil marketing companies. So it may possible that the same company which is refining is the oil marketing company. There can be different companies as well. There can be different bodies. So it is the price at which the refiners are selling this petrol and diesel to the oil marketing companies, known as the refinery gate price. So the first time this import parity price or the international angle actually brought into picture to calculate the refinery gate price. So at which the product is transferred or sold from refinery to the marketing division of the OMCs. Now, import parity price represents the price that the importer should pay in case of actual import or product at the respective Indian ports, and include the elements are. So essentially this import parity price is like in case there is a mismatch between, say, supply or demand. Suppose the demand is high and the supply is low. So I have to import that additional quantity of oil to the country. So the price at which I'll be importing, it is that price they're talking about. And this import parity price essentially consists of a couple of components. One is FOB price, free on board price, or it is also known as freight on board. So if somebody is supplying, when that particular product will be on the board of the ship, that is known as FOB price, and plus the freight and the insurance and the custom duties, etc., everything has to be paid by the buyer. So all, including all these charges, it's known as import parity price. So FOB price, ocean freight, insurance and custom duties, etc., including these 4-5 components, is known as import parity price or IPP. So when this import parity price, there is a time when these prices of petrol and diesel or these petroleum products was essentially linked to the global market. So if the price, and please remember this import parity price, when we are talking about the FOB price of the petrol and diesel and not the crude oil. So when this price in the global market, if the prices of petrol and diesel will go up, the import parity price will also go up, and that import parity price is also known as the refinery gate price. Now from that import parity price, so what happened, this import parity price came into picture in 1998. After 2002, when this APM mechanism was completely dismantled, then this import parity price took over. And in 2006, because of recommendation from the Rangarajan committee, this trade parity price came into picture. So these are the different changes, or the different changes in the pricing mechanism that has happened over since 1939 that we are talking about. So this trade parity price, so let me just tell you what is this trade parity price, and then I'll also tell you the rationale behind it. So what happened in this trade parity price, other than import parity price, they also brought another component called export parity price. And this essentially came into picture in 2006. And trade parity price is nothing but it is a weighted average of IPP and EPP. So import parity price and the export parity price in the ratio of 80-20. So 80% of IPP and 20% of EPP. Now let me tell you the rationale behind it. So in an economy, there can be sometimes the supply is high and demand is low, or sometimes the demand is high and the supply is low. Suppose in an economy, if the demand is low and supply is very high, then the refiners or somebody who is producing should at least be able to export it at a certain price. So that price he should definitely recommend that he should charge at the domestic market the price at which he is exporting. That is known as the export parity price. So, or in the other case, if the demand is higher and the supply is low, then you have to import. So that price we are essentially calling it import parity price. If you talk about Indian reliance on the global crude oil, approximately 80% of our basket or requirement is essentially made through import. From there, some percentages were taken, and it has been mentioned also in the past reports, past committee reports. Because of that reliance, that 80% weightage has been given to the import parity price, and the 20% weightage has been given to the export parity price. So this export parity price was calculated as the FOB price, freight on board price, and advanced license benefit. As of now, this particular component is nil. So the refinery gate price from 2006 was modified of two components. One is IPP and EPP. So 80% of IPP and 20% of EPP. I would show you a detailed price build-up of petrol and diesel under this TPP regime, which will essentially give you a good idea what I was trying to explain. So this FOB price and trade premium. Now let us understand what is this FOB price and which benchmark that we follow. So this Arab Gulf, there is a company called Platt and Argus. So they essentially they quote on a daily basis the Arab Gulf price of the oil. I'm talking about this particular petroleum products. In this particular case, it is called as gas oil. So this Arab Gulf, there is a benchmark called Arab Gulf. So these Platts and Argus, they essentially daily quote this Arab Gulf price for this gas oil, including all the premium or the discounts. So that particular price, that average price for the previous fortnight is essentially taken as the FOB price. That is component A. And then we need to add the ocean freight from the Arab Gulf to Indian ports, which is and second component is called as B. So if you see the definition, you can see that ocean freight from Arab Gulf to destination Indian ports as per the world scale freight rate adjusted to AFRA, which is also known as average freight rate assessment. So these two, if I take, so the first one is the cost component and the second one is the freight component. If I take these two, So I arrive at a CNF price. Now this particular price is in dollar per barrel. So you can, from here you can understand that the dollar or the exchange rate has a very huge bearing on the price, also the price of the fuel in the country. So if the currency, the depreciation of the currency, the price of the petrol or diesel is supposed to go up. So dollar per barrel to rupees per liter conversion happens here, and then you need to add the import charges like insurance, ocean loss, port dues, etc. So if you add that, and you also add the customs duty, then you arrive at a price which is called as an import parity price. This is this IPP. So if you are importing this petrol or diesel to country, this is the price that you have to pay. And the export parity price is essentially the FOB price. So now what will be the trade parity price or the refinery transfer price or the refinery gate price? So it is also known as refinery transfer price, RTP, or RGP, refinery gate price. So it is essentially the price paid by the oil marketing companies to the domestic refineries for purchase of fuel at refinery gate. So then you arrive at this 80% of import parity price and 20% of export parity price, so TPP. Now once you get that, then the companies, the oil marketing companies, they will add their inland freight and delivery charges. They will add their marketing cost and the margin. So we'll arrive at a particular value. So that is the value which is charged to the dealers. And then on the top of it, then we have to add the specific excise duty. Now the specific excise duty is not a percentage. It is essentially goes to the central government. And this excise duty is not a percentage, but it's a value. So what happened in 2008 when the global crude oil price was going up, and obviously if the crude price goes up, the petrol and diesel price in the international market will also go up. So this particular this excise duty value was becoming very thick. So to put a stop to that, this excise duty, that ad valorem component, it was shifted from that to a specific excise duty, which is now a value. So it is not linked to that petrol or diesel price to a percentage, but it is a specific value, and government can decide that value. And that is why in the recent times we have seen that when the petrol or diesel price, all these prices have probably gone up, the government has not reduced that excise duty, and they have kept it as fixed or probably have increased. So that is why we don't see much changes, though that globally the crude oil prices have gone down. I'll explain it in the next slide through a graph. And then once that excise duty is charged, then the dealers, they will also have their own commission. And then the state, every state, they will have their different value-added tax percentage. So they will charge that, and that also including the VAT on the dealer's commission. So this excise duty essentially goes to the central government, this VAT to the state government. So if I take these components, then I arrive at a price which is called as retail selling price, or RSP. So in a nutshell, how I am arriving at the petrol and the diesel price, just to giving you a summary of that. So first there will be an FOB price and the cost, and then there will be an insurance and the freight components, etc. And I will be arrive at a price which is called import parity price, and the only FOB price is the export parity price. From there we arrive at TPP, or the trade parity price. Now with the trade parity price, or the refinery transfer price, is the price which the OMCs will be buying from a refinery, and then to that they will be adding their own margins, and there will be a excise duty will be added to that. There will be dealer's commission, and there will be VAT, and then we will finally be arriving at the retail selling price. Now I just want to tell you one point. This is the price decided for a refiner, but it is not necessary that this is the price at which the fuel has been sold in India so far. The picture was a little different. This price was required to calculate the subsidy amount or the under recoveries. So these are essentially, this slide will give you the values. Like if you see the central excise tariff, this basic Senvai duty, special additional excise duty, and additional excise duty, etc. If you add that, you will get a specific excise duty. So you have to add that. Like if I talk about high-speed diesel, it is currently 17.33. And if you see the sales tax or VAT devised by various states, these are in the percentages. And the state governments keep on changing this, and that is why you'll see many news articles that there are requests to reduce the VAT percentage from the state governments. This slide essentially talks about the price build-up of how how it is a very, I have taken an example from the 2nd January, how this petrol and diesel price have been built up for 3 companies, Indian Oil, BPCL and HPCL, and at Delhi. So you can see the same calculation that I have told that has been mentioned here. This kind of information is also available with PPSC, Petroleum Planning and Analysis Cell, and also with this oil marketing companies. So you can see that CNF of gas oil is at 66.07 for petrol, and diesel it is 63.37. And then there is an average exchange rate. As I always mentioned, that this exchange rate is also very, very important, because the moment your price, your currency weakens, or there is a depreciation in your currency, the cost, import cost will go up. So if I see the RTP from there, they have calculated the RTP, or the refinery transfer price, which is 28.88 for petrol and 27.58. And if you see the final price, the retail selling price, it is actually 70. So if I take 30 by 70, it will be probably be the actual cost of fuel, or the RTP is around 40% of the 40 or 35% of the overall cost, and and then the remaining is essentially the marketing cost and the excise duty and the VAT. So from there you can see the price charged to the dealers is 31.52. I've taken the first column as an example. So between this 28.88 and 31.52, essentially the marketing cost of the Wences, the margins, etc. There is an addition of the specific excise duty at 17.33 liter per liter. So this is a specific duty, and this is a value, percentage. So even if the price goes down, if the government decides that okay, we'll keep the same excise duty, that percentage will still be there, that value will still be there. So it is added. 17.33, you can see it's for diesel, and 21.48 for petrol. Then you have a dealer commission to it, and then you have a VAT, which is Delhi at 16.75%, and then also air ambience charge at rupees 250 per KL. If I add those components, then it comes to 15 rupees for petrol and 8.54, and altogether I arrive at a percent of 70 rupees for petrol per liter on 2nd January and 57.82. So very importantly, you can see the actual cost, or the refinery transfer price, is close to only 30 rupees, where the fuel is sold at 70 rupees. And a large component of that whole price essentially goes for paying the excise duty and the VAT. That is the current reality. Now, what I'd like to portray here, I just want to, in this slide, I just want to take this. I've taken the values from April 2000 to December 2016, and I have put the price of the crude oil, Indian basket of crude, and also the petrol prices in Delhi and the diesel price in Delhi, and let us examine that how these 3 prices they have actually moved. Why we have taken the basket of crude? As I've already mentioned that and if I talk about Indian basket of crude, it is essentially a mix of different type of crude. So if I see that basket and that price, based on if that price will go up, then internationally petrol and diesel price will also go up. So we have taken that as a benchmark, and we have also seen that how our Indian petrol price and the diesel price have actually moved along with that, and what are different actions that government has taken in this particular time, in this period. And so you will essentially see how this pricing thing works in real-time example. So this is the time of 2002 when this APM was dismantled, and we essentially came to a regime when it is market-driven pricing, and it is no more controlled by the government. So between this 2002 to 2004, there were some 23 revisions were made to the price of petrol and diesel, and within that there was 8 reductions, but there were 15 increases. So from this, government actually understood that it can go both way. What happened from 2004 onwards till 2008, there was a huge price volatility in the global market, and it became very difficult for the government to increase the price of petrol and diesel to that extent, because it is definitely a politically sensitive subject, and it definitely touches the life of the poor people. So it's not possible for a government to simply link the diesel price to that level. There could have been all-around inflation in the economy. So government had to control that. So though we went into a IPP regime, but from 2004 onwards, government actually started setting the price of the petrol and diesel in the country in the face of extreme volatility in the international market. Now, so you can see there is an increasing gap between that red line and the blue and the green line. So that part is essentially called the under recovery of the oil marketing companies. So their cost is very high, but they are getting very low amount from selling their fuel. So that is essentially called the under recovery, which government tried to make up through subsidies, and these subsidies are primarily through the oil bonds, and oil bonds for 20 years, a different tenure. So, and what happened over the years, if you can see from 2004, this gap started increasing. By some 2009, 2010, this under recoveries, I saw one report, it probably came in 2013. That is a time when this subsidy amount was close to 1,61,000 crores, a huge amount of under recovery of the OMCs, and government subsidy burden was huge for that. So government obviously used to disburse subsidy for various things. So obviously oil and gas was the major industry, then fertilizer was another. What happened in 2008, for a very small amount of time, there was this subprime crisis, and suddenly the crude price slashed and crashed from a very high of around $130, $135 per barrel to a very low of close to $40 per barrel. But that situation didn't last long. Within a year or so, we have seen the sudden rebound of the oil prices, and then again it touched around $120 per level in 2011. So you can see this oil price reached its peak and then crashed during subprime crisis in 2008. Now what happened in 2010? Government finally decided that the under recoveries of the oil companies are actually going to a huge level, and the subsidy burden of the government is at such a level that it is affecting the fiscal deficit of the country. So they finally decided that out of these four things, petrol, diesel, kerosene, and LPG, petrol is one fuel which is primarily used in the cars and with the well-to-do people, and they thought of deregulating that price. So though that IETP or refinery price is there, that is the price for calculation, the actual price charged in the market was much lower and decided by the government. So from 2010 onwards, that is the time when government actually decided that, okay, we are going to deregulate the price of the petrol. They also had a plan to deregulate the price of the diesel, but it was not very easy because there is some social, it is a political subject and there is a social angle to it, because this is a fuel for the masses. It is also used for agriculture, this is used for transportation, various other things. So if you can see from 2010, you can see that petrol price is essentially following that red line. So this is because of the deregulation effect. But the diesel price is still kept at a lower level. But government in a year or so decided that it cannot go on like this, and we have to phasely, we have to deregulate this whole thing. And they started increasing the price of diesel by 40 to 50 paisa per liter every month. That is a kind of increase was happening, and we have seen those kind of increase in the UPA 2 regime government, and then it happened for almost 2.5 years. That every month there was an increase of 40 to 50 paisa in the diesel price, and that is what you can essentially see from March, or if you can see October 12 to November 14, around that time there is a steady increase in that graph of the green line, which essentially indicates what I'm telling. So this happened. So during this time, the time that I'm mentioning, the diesel price was regulated, however, was increasing by 50 paisa per liter in order to reduce the under recovery. And then when this the present government that came into power, then suddenly because of different things, the shale gas came into US market, and since there was a higher usage of shale gas, the demand from US gone down. Chinese economy was also not doing well, and then after some time Iran also came into the market for supplying of their oil. Because of certain dynamics, there was a demand supply mismatch in the market, and the oil price again crashed, and it crashed to, it has actually gone below $40 per barrel in last year, if we have seen. So this was a good time when government thought that this is the perfect opportunity to also deregulate the diesel price, because if the crude price is going up, that means the international petrol and diesel price is also going up. And if we take that opportunity to deregulate the pricing of the diesel will also go up. But if it is on the other way around, if the price of the crude is going down, even if we deregulate, still the diesel price will go down. So that will not actually impact the common masses. And obviously, since I've already told it is a complex subject and not understood by the masses, they would also not understand, and there are obviously a political angle. The normal masses will essentially feel that the new government is essentially reduce the price of the petrol and the diesel after coming to power. So this is a fantastic opportunity for the government to reduce or deregulate the price at that point in time. So if you see, this is the time, that is November 14, when the crude price started going down. And in October 2014, government finally deregulated the diesel price. Now you can see that the crude price is essentially for the last 2 years has actually tanked to almost a level of $30, $35, and now has recovered to some extent to around close to $52 per barrel. But the petrol and diesel price is now much higher, at a much higher level. It is why? Because already mentioned, if you see that whole pricing, there is a 70 rupees per liter petrol, but the only RTP is only 30 rupees. So that remaining gap, that central excise duty or a specific excise duty and the VAT, etc., is essentially controlled by the government. The prices have never gone down. So it is not essentially it is a two-way kind of a two-way pricing. One part is linked to the petrol and diesel price, global petrol and diesel price. Another price which is fixed by the government. That they never reduced. So that is why the petrol, if I see, and there is a lot of questions in everybody's mind, though the crude price have gone down, why there was no reduction in this thing. If you will see, because of that crude price have gone down, the RTP may have gone down by say 5 rupees or 7 rupees. But between that time, government has actually kept that excise duty unchanged, or probably increased the VAT percentage. And that is why we didn't see much change in the petrol and the diesel price in this thing. But it is good that we have finally reached to a free market economy kind of when both the petrol and the diesel prices regulated, and the under recovery of the oil marketing companies have drastically gone down. And that is why suddenly from the last year we see there is a huge amount of investment is coming in the refining sector. Is already 15 to 20 projects line up. Most of the refineries are going for their capacity expansions, and they're also converting the refineries from BS3 to BS4, or either from BS4 to BS6. Huge amount of investment in coming, because now the refiners, they have money. There is not much under recovery. So way forward, and is there a need to rethink? I think the next step is probably be the deregulation of the other two fuels. But however, these two fuels touch the common man's life. So it is a politically sensitive matter, and I think it would actually take time before government even can think of. However, these two fuels are supplied at unsubsidized rate to certain segments of the society. We feel that the regulation of this petrol and diesel price is the right step forward towards the free market economy. And though OMCs regularly publish the price builders for petrol and diesel, and it is very much available in the website of PPSC and the OMCs, their websites, general masses are not aware of this price. And many a times, the people from the rural India, when they are using diesel, they don't understand this kind of linkage of the pricing of the petrol and diesel with the international prices. And most of the time, they feel that it is just an activity or interventions from the government, and government is changing these prices at their will. And that is why many a times, and sometimes this has become a subject of discussion in the political world. So we feel that, the need of the hour is to educate the masses on how these prices are linked with global oil prices, and they are the components which are under the purview of the central and the state government, and the components which are essentially linked to this, so that this subject can be well understood and people should not misinterpret this kind of price changes. Thank you so much from my side.
Now we will take the questions. First question is from Mohit. What are the factors affecting diesel prices?
What are the factors affecting diesel prices? I think we have already discussed on these things. So there I'll essentially put it under three broad basket. So three heads. One is global price of crude oil, because based on that, finally the international petrol or diesel price will depend. And so that is one very important factor. Second factor is the exchange rate. So whether your economy, your currency is actually getting weakened or getting strengthened, is there a depreciation of your currency? All these factors that have to look into. So in the recent times, in last 4 or 5 years, we have seen that rupee has significantly depreciated from around 60 odd level to $1. $1 equals to 60 to close to now 70. So this obviously increases your import value. So that is the second head. And obviously the third point is this excise duties and the VAT and all these duties, etc., charged by the state and the central government. So if I see the current pricing mechanism, these are the three factors based on which this diesel prices that affect, petrol or diesel prices that affect. Yeah.
Next question is from Milton. What is logic for fixing 80% IPP and 20% EPP?
Yeah. So as I told you, nowhere it has been very categorically mentioned that why there has been this weightage of 80% has been given to IPP and the 20% to this. But as I mentioned that there is a report, Parik Committee report in 2013, where they essentially examined that whether the current policy regime is fine, the TPP regime is fine, or should we look into any different kind of a price regimes. And they have essentially examined some 5-6 different type of ways to price. That is where when they have talked about the TPP, they have tried to explain it, and that is the same thing what I already mentioned, and I'm again telling you. So it is essentially kind of a supply and demand mechanism. So in an economy, sometimes there can be supply is higher, there is a higher supply and lower demand, or the vice versa. The demand is higher and supply is low. So if for a refiner, for the refiners, if the supply is high and demand is low, then they would try to export that thing. So they would at least be able to charge that export price, or which is called an export parity price, from the domestic market. And the other way around, if the demand is higher and the supply is low, then they have to import it at certain price from the outside. That is called import parity price. If I see today's scenario of our total requirement, oil requirement, and how much is export, or how much, what is the volume or the percentage we import, it is close to 77% to 80%. It might be because of that, because we are also talking about import parity price, and we also import around 80% of our crude. Maybe to put the weightage in a right perspective, they have assigned that 80% to it and 20% to it. But we cannot say that it is exactly right, because if I see the LPG, etc., there it is 100% import parity price, but it is not that 100% of LPG is imported. It is essentially some volume of LPG is actually domestically produced in the refineries and the fractionation plants, and some amount is imported. So though we feel that this is probably be the logic, but there is a doubt to it. Yes.
Question from Astha. Can you please elaborate why the central excise duty has changed up to 2.5 times for petrol and almost 4.5 times for diesel within the period of 2014 to 2017?
Correct. So this is an as I've already mentioned, that this is a specific excise duty, and this is essentially decided by the central government. So petrol is already, if you'll see, the petrol was already on a higher side. The cost of the petrol was always on a higher side. The diesel price was essentially at a relatively lower. There was a 10 to 15 rupee gap between the petrol and diesel price. Probably that is the gap which the government has probably tried to minimize that gap, because there was a wide notion that the diesel is only used for the transportations or diesel is only used by the agricultural people, or those category of the masses, which is not correct, because now of late we can see the diesel vehicles or diesel cars are actually flooding the market, and all well-to-do people are essentially using diesel car. And so the government probably realized that the price at which probably diesel is sold and the price is sold, that kind of a premium for petrol is probably not justified, and there is a room for increasing the diesel price, because ultimately that money is collected will be spent for the overall economy. So that is why probably the diesel price, that excise duty, which is a very specific duty, has been on a higher side for diesel.
Question from Praveen. Should the government impose high taxes on essential commodities like petrol and diesel, especially when it is trying to keep the inflation down?
So it is a controversial subject, and there can be many opinions to it. So obviously you have to see, which are the key commodities. Like if I talk about petrol and diesel, I think it is not as important as a commodity like food items. So, and these are definitely the fuels which are used by the well-to-do people. If you see the kerosene or the LPG, you will see there is a very lesser percentage of duties for this thing which are going to the masses, and there are also subsidies prevalent there. Since these are the fuels which are used by the people where they have the money power, or they can actually pay that value. So I think it is not very wrong from the government side to put a duty to it, and whatever earnings they are getting, essentially finally giving it back to the society through various kind of public investment. You have seen that the investment mode was little down in last 1 or 2 years. There's a lot of public spending is actually happening. All these monies are essentially coming from these kind of duties. Yeah.
Next question is from Alish. What effects do you foresee in removing subsidies provided to oil companies, reducing the excise duties, and let oil marketing firms decide the retail price of fuel at pumps? Won't healthy competition benefit the final consumers?
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear it. Can you please repeat the question?
What effect? The question is, what effects do you foresee in removing subsidies provided to oil companies and reducing the excise duties, and let oil marketing firms decide the retail price of fuel at pumps? Won't healthy competition benefit the final consumers?
Yes, definitely. The subsidy component, the moment I am talking about this petrol and diesel, there is no such subsidy component as of now. It is already market linked. So there is definitely a healthy competition now, and I think because of that, you will now start seeing the other private players are also now becoming a significant player. Till that, till the time this regulation was there, or these prices were regulated, we have seen the market is predominantly dominated by the PSUs like IOCL, BPCL, HPCL, these companies. But I think the private players are also now coming, and they can decide their price, which is, I think, finally there will be a healthy competition, and it will be ultimately benefit the consumers.
Next question from Sachin. How will GST change the pricing structure?
Okay, good question. So as you all be knowing that though we are talking about removing different type of duties and multiple tax structure and duty structure, and with a single tax that is called GST, single duty. But unfortunately, I think probably there are obviously a lot of complications and complexities, and the government is actually discussing on that. The GST will not be applicable on the petroleum products. So the current structure or the tax structure, that will continue there. So the petroleum products have been kept outside the ambit of the GST. Now I think with this, what will happen, there would be some issues at the refinery side, like if somebody and a tax expert will probably be able to give more light. But what we understand that if I'm talking about from a refinery perspective, so when they are essentially investing in any project, so they have to, or they are buying something, they have to pay, they will essentially be paying the GST, and they will, it is GST. But on the other hand, when they are selling, it is the excise duty, and it is the it is VAT and excise duty and all these things. So because of that, they will essentially be subject to dual type of taxation systems, and which finally it will be a difficult task for them to manage that. And in some cases, they will probably also not be getting the required credit from the government for that, because on one side you are only paying GST, and other side there is an excise duty and all. So probably those kind of challenges this oil marketing companies, they will be subjected to, and it is only the time will tell how they come out of those challenges. But GST is, for the time being, will not be applicable on the petroleum products.
Question from Shalini. With coming up of electric cars in future, do you see a change in price of diesel and petrol?
Yes, so that is a point. This renewable energy is actually taking a direct head-on competition with the oil, and that is not an Indian phenomenon; it is a global phenomenon. And because of that, we actually see this angle is also working. Why the oil prices have actually gone down. So this renewable is also an important factor. Why we can see a sudden dip in oil prices. I already talked about 2-3 things like shale gas discovery in USA or China, and I've also talked about that Iran also joined the sanction removed from the Iran. But this renewable angle has also been taken into account, and because of that, it has actually taken a hit. It would not be a very, I'll not say it is going to happen tomorrow, but obviously because of this thing, the demand for petrol or diesel, etc., definitely going to go down. And so we don't know, we have to essentially see, because we are seeing, because of this price, this thing, producing companies are talking about artificial production cut, and because of that, they are essentially, that is the only way they are seeing that how the price can go up. And we have actually seen that Brent actually gained some amount, some value in the last few months. It has now reached to some 50 to 55, and the experts are telling that probably will end 2017 with $58-59 per barrel, that kind of a price. So maybe yes, because of this this thing, the demand may go down, but then we have to also see the other dynamics and what all initiatives have been taken by the OPEC or the non-OPEC or the oil producing countries. What kind of that angle we also have to see how whether it is actually affecting the price or not. So if there are these kind of production cuts that we see, we probably may not see that kind of a drop in price. So we have to, it is that particular time the dynamics will decide what will be the price of of oil in the market. But yes, introduction of electric car or introduction of renewable energy, and I'll not only talk about electric car, there are many cases where petrol or diesel is essentially used for maybe power generation or for various things, which is now currently been replaced by a electric equipment or something. So this will definitely have an impact on global demand.